Alright, so I'm going to do some quick basic UVs. I'm going to show you how quick and easy this can be. So I'm not going to UV everything. I'll just UV, let me hide this. I'll just UV the dude. So first thing I tend to do is I'll come up to the workspace and then I'll change this to UV editing. And he's already got some UVs, but we'll make some new ones. But actually, you can see that this provides a good strategy for laying out like cuts and things like that. Usually I will cut to the wrist and then I will cut the hands off and then cut around the palm of the hand and stuff like that, and you'll see in a minute. But essentially you want to put the seams in places that won't be seen as much, so under the arms, the inside of the thighs, that sort of stuff. So okay, so let's get to it. So let's go ahead and start laying out UVs. So he's already got UVs laid out, but even if he didn't, what I'm going to do is the same. So I'm going to come up to UV, and I'm just going to do a planar. That whether he has UVs or not, this is going to give you a base starting point that you can work off of. Okay, I'm going to go to right click and go to edge mode. And then from here, what I can start doing is, if I double click that edge, you can see it gave me an edge ring around the neck. And then I can come over here, down under cut and sew. There's cut, and you can also sew, right? You can cut, you can sew, you can do a bunch. But I'm going to just stick to the basics and just show the basics. So you could do a cut. And so you could double click, but another thing that you might want to do is like select an edge and then select everything between that, right? So you're not going click, 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 right? So you click one edge, and then if you come up here and hold shift and double click, it'll give you the selection between those two edges. And then I can keep that up, shift double click, boom. And so really I've only clicked 3 edges, but it gave me a nice loop. And then I'm going to hit cut again. Cool. Typically, you'll need to do things like cutting out the sections of the eyes. F to frame. And double click that. Shift double click that. And if we right click and hold, so it's Control Shift. So I'm holding Control Shift, right click, and going up to symmetry. I'm going to see if symmetry will work. It looks like it is. So, and what that's going to do is if I make the cuts here, it's going to go over here. So again, Control Shift, right click, and then up to symmetry, and you can see that you can just go onto that and turn that on. If you're having a hard time with that, though, you can always go to the modeling standard, and you can turn symmetry on there. I'm going to go back to UV editing. But essentially, this will just cut our work in half. All right, so I got that edge loop selected, and because we've got symmetry, it's just got the other side selected. So I'm going to go to cut. Cool. And I'm going to do the same thing with the nostrils. Just double click that ring, gives me both sides, and we'll do a cut. Now, typically speaking, the mouth, you are going to need to do. We might have to unfold this to see, but there should be. Maybe we'll just double click the. Having a hard time seeing, so I'm gonna hit 4 and just see what that's doing. Oh, so he's got some teeth in there. I see what's going on. Let's do this. Go to face, and then we'll just grow this section. So I'm holding shift and hitting the greater than sign. Alright, and I can see by holding shift and clicking greater than sign that we're getting that. So what I'm going to do, there's this little button right here. I'm just going to click that, and then it's just going to isolate. Oops, I'm going to click F to frame that. It's just going to isolate that selection for me. And actually, let's do this. Let's go to edge mode. Double click that edge in there, and then let's cut that. And then we could take this, shift double click, shift double click, and then we could do another cut. Okay, I'm just gonna undo that. And the reason why I did that was just because it was hard to see and get in there. So sometimes soloing areas can be helpful. All right, we need to cut the ears loose from the head. So I'm just gonna double click this. Let's click F to frame it. See what we got. Shift double click that. Shift double click that. Shift double click that. And I got a section for the ears, and I'm gonna cut that. Cool. Alright, now we need to cut the arms off, so to speak. So I'm gonna just double click. Give us a nice loop. Cut. I'm gonna click on this. Maybe even right there, and then I'm gonna follow this line down. Shift, double click. Cut. Double click. Shift double click. And I'm just making sure that it goes all the way around. And if you miss it, it's not the end of the world. You can always cut it later, because sometimes I will miss things, and once I do the unfold out here, I'm like, oh no, that didn't completely cut loose, and then you can always cut that loose. Okay, so looks like what we want to do. So I tend to try to go up and cut along the middle of like the thumb, that sort of stuff. So let's come in here. And so we're going to probably want to follow that. Double click. Okay, and so what's nice is if this is like I think it is, we can just go from finger to finger. So I'm going to hold shift, double click. It's not what I was hoping. So I'm going to control Z that and shift. Shift double click. So something's going on. Oh, there's a little triangle in there. So it is what it is. We'll just have to get in there and do what we can. And this will shift double click. We'll just shift double click and then come in here and oops, clean up these triangles. Shift, double click, shift, shift. Okay. Okay, click F. Okay. Shift double click. It's getting a little tricky to get in here and see, but we'll work it out. Okay, cool. And then we'll just connect back to that. And then cut. Alright, cool. Let's go do the same thing to the legs. Let's get all that separated. Just double click. Get all the way. Think so. And cut. And so I'm doing like a full human, and I think you can see like how quick this is going. It's not that bad in the grand scheme of things. Maybe we'll go up a little higher. Oh, the feet work perfectly. That's kind of how I was hoping the hands were going to work, but it is what it is. The feet work well. So I'm going to cut that. Cool. And then we need to do like an inside seam. Do that. Looks like it's shift to click. Let's try to follow that edge down. It's that one. Nope. Control Z. Nope, I'm doing the same line. Okay. So I think it's that one. There we go. Just follow that. And shift double click. So I'm holding shift a lot so I can continue to add to my selection and cut. And don't worry, like if you ever make like some weird cut, right, and you're like, oh, I made some weird cuts. I did not mean to do that. It's okay. You can go in there and select those and then just sew them back together. It's not a big deal. So we have a cut option, and then we can also sew edges back together. Okay, so what you typically want to do is like cut a section off, like the legs, and then, but it's like right now I cut essentially by cutting the bottom of the feet off, right? Actually, I should also put one around the ankle, and I'll kind of explain that. So shift, double click, shift, shift, cut. All right, cool. So essentially, this leg has been cut loose from the body here, and the foot has been cut off, but it's still a tube, so you have to like cut that tube in half so that it can be unfolded here, right? Or it's going to be, if it's a connected tube and you try to unfold it out here, it's just going to lay on top of itself and it's going to be messy. So you want to cut it loose at the top, at the bottom, and then just put a seam to allow it to be able to unfold and unwrap. Hopefully that makes sense. We did the same thing with the arms, right? We cut it loose, but it's still a tube. So we cut a line down the middle, so now it can unfold, okay? Essentially, that's what's happening with the body too, right? We've cut the head off of it, and we've got the arms and the legs, but now it's essentially an oddly shaped tube, but it still is like that. So we need to give it the ability to unwrap as well. So I'm going to click that, and then I'm going to come and I'm going to shift, double click that, and then we'll cut that. And sometimes, like in these areas that we're not going to see a lot, I'll try to extend those cuts a little bit. So, like for example, with the forehead, I'll typically cut the forehead down until I think there's about a hairline there, right? Okay, and kind of like what I was saying, like the ears, we may need to go through and like cut some of this loose so that it can unfold, but we can give it a try. So essentially, we got this guy all cut up. So I'm just going to right click, go to object mode, so edge, object mode, and with him selected, there's really 3 or 4 buttons that I just want you to be familiar with just to get started. So there's cut, there's sew if you need to sew things together, so that would be 2, and then the other one is just the unfold button. So once you've cut things out, all you have to do is open up the unfold and click unfold, and now it's going to unwrap everything. And we essentially have UVs that are on top of each other. If I right click and go to UV shell, I can come and move shells around. Now the problem is that symmetry is getting in my way now that I've got everything cut. So I'm gonna hold Control Shift and right click, go up to symmetry, and I'm gonna turn that off. Or I could, back through the modeling and turn it off that way too. But now if I go right click on this side and I go to UV shell, now I can just get individual UVs, but you can see we've essentially got all these nice UV shells all separated. So now you'll see that there's some numbers. There's 0 all the way to, let's see, to 1, and then also 0 to 1. And so this is a square. It's also referred to as UDIM, so this would be our first UDIM. You can have more UDIMs by going from 1 to 2, and then 2 to 3, and things like that. So you can have multiple texture spaces. But for right now, keep it simple. Just keep it in the 0 to 1. And now that may sound confusing, but really it's not. All you have to do, now that we clicked unfold, if you just come down to arrange and layout, I'm going to come down to layout. Now you could set this to layout across multiple UDIMs, but the default settings should just lay out into one UDIM. So I'm going to go ahead and right click, go back to object mode, and I'm just going to click layout. And you can see it packed this 0 to 1, 0 to 1 with all of our UVs. Now there's a few other things that would probably be good to talk about at some point, but this is the basics of it, and this will get you pretty far right here too, right? I don't want to throw textile density and things like that at you right now, but because this is essentially laid out UVs, and this isn't going to be bad. Now, one thing you can do is if you click on this little checker box, okay, what it's going to do is it's going to lay out text, a texture, and if I turn that texture on, right, so if I click that on, then I can see the UVs over here too. So if I click both of those on, I can see, if I click this on, I can see how it's laying out across the body, and if I click it here, I can see it here too. But essentially, if we come over here, we can see, like if there's a texture, this is how the texture is going to lay on him, right? And so as long as the squares aren't like totally like stretched or squished or something like that, you know that your texture is going to fit on here pretty well, because if squares do, then anything is, right? And so these just give you a way to kind of look at it and see like, oh, is this going to give me any problems? Like, okay, let's say ears, right? Because we didn't really do a whole lot with the ears. Actually, it's kind of looking better than I thought it would, honestly. Yeah, so essentially, this guy has UVs, and now you could put textures and take them into Substance Painter and all that sort of fun stuff, and start doing textures, because this is the UV side of it, and he's essentially done. And as you can see, like I UV'd a whole human, and it really didn't take me that long, right? Again, we can talk about some other tools, like if you want to get your UVs a little straighter and that sort of stuff. We can talk about that later, but right now, this is like 90% of what you're going to want, or maybe even more, like 95%. Okay, there's a few extra things, but this right here, what I've gone over, just focus on that, and this is actually not a bad UV layout. I'll show you one last thing. I'm going to turn those off. If you right click on this side and go to edge, I want you to be aware that you can click edges here, and then you can also cut them here too. So I could put a cut here. Now I would have to then come back over here, right click, go to object mode, and then come and do another unfold to get that to take effect, right? And actually I think that did kind of help. And then we'll just do another layout so that our UV shells aren't like overlapping. And yeah, and we could check the textures again. Make sure everything's looking okay. Cool. So typically I'll cut here, but if there's some areas that are really hard to get to or I can't tell what's going on, sometimes it's a little easier to see what's going on this side. So, but essentially we want our UV shells to be separate because we don't want them to overlap, right? Because if I put a texture on here, it would go both onto the body and to the foot, right? So we want it to be like that, where things aren't overlapping, and that's kind of what the layout does for us, right? So we unfold it to get this nice smooth stuff, and then we just do a layout, and then it packs it and stacks them and stuff like that. And then if you want to move things around, E for rotate, you can. Just again, I'd be really careful not to overlap anything. And then the other thing, be real careful not to go out of that one space. One thing that can help is if you turn this stuff on, you'll notice if I start to go out of the UDIM, it'll turn on the next UDIM, right? So this UDIM 1002, it's turning that on, right? And so if I go out of that UDIM, it's going to kind of pop those open. So if you want to move things around, you can, but you can also just stick with the basic layout. So anyways, yeah, this dude has laid out UVs.